Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is the November 19th Open Space Conservancy Trust special video meeting. I am Marie Bender and the chair of the board. In accordance with Proclamation 20-28-.11 and the governor's extended Safe Start order, tonight's board meeting is using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later this evening. Parks Operations Manager Lynn Summergren, Council Member Lisa Androl, and several other staff members are participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Other public audience members may be listening to the meeting by telephone or via the internet. Welcome to all and thank you for joining us tonight. So the first order of business is roll call. If everybody would make sure their mics are turned on, Deb can take the roll.
We have Trustee Hillary Este
Here.
Hey, almost. There isn't an S. Trustee Craig Olson.
Here.
Trustee Carol Bursa here. Trustee Marie Bender.
Here.
Trustee Tom Hildebrand. Trustee Geraldine Poor.
Here.
And Trustee Lisa Androl.
Here.
Thank you.
So first of all, I'd like to welcome Lisa. This is your first meeting. It's really nice to see you and I hope you enjoy meeting with us.
Thank you. Apologies for not being able to make the last meeting, which was the first meeting, but yeah, some stuff intervened, but I'm happy to be able to be here tonight.
Great, thank you. So the first order of business is approval of our minutes of the October 15th, 2020 special meeting. If you have comments, if you would raise your hand, I will recognize you. I had one comment, and that had to do with the review and consideration of the updated bylaws. The first bullet item says striking the 2-year term limit. I think what we were talking about is striking the limit to 2 terms, not the 2-term limit. Does that make sense?
Yes. Marie, yeah, I had noted that also, striking the 2-term limit as opposed to the 2-year term limit.
Yeah, I think originally it said you could only have 2 terms.
Yeah.
And that's what we struck. Not the length of the term, it's the number of terms that we struck.
Okay.
Okay.
Make that note.
Any other comments? Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
I think that's a second from Craig.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye. Or raise your hand.
Aye.
I think it's unanimously approved. The second order of business is a discussion of the 2021 work plan. And Elena, you're going to handle that?
I am. You know, Marie, I want to make sure that we don't have anyone here for public appearances just to get.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did miss that.
Just to get a quick check from the city clerk, just to make sure that no one's on the line.
My fault.
I am checking now. There is nobody in the attendees room, and I did not receive an email today indicating that somebody wished to speak.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Deb. Yeah, so excuse me while I juggle things a little bit here. So this item is the first time that the trustees will be discussing the 2021 work plan. So the work plan for next year. And usually this is the first meeting where you look at this is the last meeting of the year. And it's really a brainstorm time to look at what you would like to see for next year in terms of discussion points, any issues that you anticipate coming up. And because the 2020 work plan really wasn't fulfilled because there were very few meetings of the trust, a lot of what I put into the 2021 work plan is actually just carryover from last year's or this year's work plan. But everything is up for discussion at this point. And then once you all have had a chance to discuss what you'd like on there, I will make some notes while you're discussing it and looking at it. And then I will bring back another draft of it for the January meeting. And at that time you can vote to approve it or make any final amendments to it. And then that will be attached to the annual report to council from the trust board, the annual report. So, so this is really just a first look, and you know, there may be things in there that you want to strike at this point or add other items. I will note just one last thing, which is that in general, we try to balance the workload across the meetings. You'll notice that I have in there 6 meetings, which would be sort of our normal schedule for trust board meetings. When meetings do get canceled, those items usually get delayed until the next meeting, which usually isn't a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I will zoom in so that you can see a little bit better. And let me know if you all are able to see that okay.
Yes.
That looks fine.
Okay. So right now in the 2021 work plan in January, I have some ongoing items. So one of them is the first look at the annual report to council. And this is required by the bylaws. This is something that staff drafts, and then the trustees have a chance to look over before it goes to council, usually on the consent calendar. The work plan, which is this document, is attached as a courtesy to the council, just so they understand what the trust is working on currently. Quadrant reports are listed as an ongoing item. So, you know, everything that's addressed at every meeting, it's only listed in the first month. And then the other item that I've put on here is an update to the fire management plan. I have had a couple requests to look at this and had some chance to talk with the fire chief, Chief Heitman, about our fire management plan, which hasn't been updated since 2003. So I thought that January might be a good time to look at this. In March, I put down the parking on 84th Ave Southeast. This was an item that is a carryover from the 2020 work plan that had been of interest to the trustees the November before. So looking at what, if there are parking issues along there, and maybe how the trust would like to address that if they so decide. The restoration work plan, which we'll be discussing tonight, would normally come to the trust in March. And so this is really the first look at what's planned for restoration on all trust properties for that year. So we'll get back on schedule with that next year. In May, I have down a discussion item on plant selection. So again, this is a carryover item from the 2020 work plan. There had been some interest in talking with staff about how staff makes decisions about the species that are put into the park, you know, about how the root diseases on some of those trees influence our plant selection, and our ratios of trees to shrubs, things like that. And again, this is something that, you know, you can decide to keep there or move around, whatever you like. Again, traditionally in usually a little bit later in the spring, in May, we talk about the trail work plan for the year. This is crafted by our trails specialist, who comes up with a plan of the trails that need some significant attention. So this is about any decommission work or rerouting, or, you know, significant work to get water off of trails and deal with issues that have come up over the previous year. Once a year, we discuss the off-leash dog issue and whether there is a need for additional education measures or any particular issues that have come up in the previous year. This was an item that we have not done this year, so the thinking was that we would get back on track with it next year. July 15th brings the election of officers, as it does every year. Another item that I had been asked to add to the 2020 work plan was discussion about a permanent restroom facility. So this is an item that has come up several times over the years about whether there should be a permanent restroom facility at the park, or whether we should be sticking with the portable restroom that's currently situated right by the main kiosk in the northwest quadrant. So this is as yet to be determined sort of exactly what the trust would like to discuss in relation to that. September, we generally look at any Eagle Scout projects, recognition of those scouts. And then at the September meeting also is when we do the annual herbicide report, which is required by the herbicide use protocol. So any use of herbicides on trust properties within that year and any other planned uses that we foresee for the next year. And then right now, I don't have anything listed for the November meeting. So I think with that, Marie, maybe you could call on folks who would like to give some input on this, and I would be happy to add any of those items.
So everybody's now a little tiny box, but.
and I can certainly stop sharing.
No, I think this is fine. I mean, this to me looks pretty much like what we've talked about the last several years, but so I think the question really would be for people, do you have things we want to add, modify, subtract? Are there any comments from anyone?
Looks like Jerry.
Yeah.
Her hand
I was
up.
going to say this is Lisa. I have my hand raised. I don't know if what the protocol is here.
I don't know where that is on my screen.
Let's see.
Well, that's
Waving your hand
perfect.
works really well.
I'm gonna wave.
We can wave. Craig, go ahead. I mean, whoever wants to talk, I'll get my question in at some point. No big deal.
Carol, I think you were waving your hand.
Yeah, I just had one question because of the truncated number of meetings that we've had this year. Are there items that have been left unaddressed that we ought to think about reinserting here? Or have we managed to cover off on the major items that we had listed for this year?
So I think that there's a difference between new items that haven't, that are really, items that are being brought for the first time. And all of the ones that were missed this year have been transferred over onto the 2021 work plan.
Okay.
So didn't let any of them just disappear with that work plan.
Yeah.
But also a fair amount of them on here that are just renewed annually, and we generally keep them within about the same time period every year, and those have all been transferred over also. So I don't think that we're missing anything that the trust had wanted to talk about. I think it's just a question about whether there are new items or whether any of those need to be struck.
Okay, thank you.
And so similarly, I have a question about regular recurring things. And as a longtime member of the board, I've enjoyed participating in what seem like extracurricular activities, like the Leap for Green when that is held, and the June Trails Day opening, and then letterboxing. And I recognize those aren't activities of the trust, but wondered if, I know sometimes we get reports out and we have the end of the summer letterboxing awards with the community kids. So wondered if you thought that was appropriate to include on the calendar.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to bring up. Thank you, Jerry. So the reason that I haven't included them is because those activities were supported by the recreation team, which is no longer really in any sort of existing form right now and is looking at recovery planning right now. I find it a little doubtful that those programs will be back on board next year. in the way that they were before. But certainly, probably the biggest part of this would have been the letterbox.
Elaine, I've lost audio on you.
What's that? Sorry. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
We can hear you. We can hear you finally.
Great. So I think maybe the big one that I removed, Jerry, was the one that was in November normally, just the letterboxing recognition ceremony that we normally do. I think it really remains to be seen whether the volunteers will decide to pick that up next year or not. I'm happy to put it in as a placeholder, certainly, though, if that program does come back on board. Leap for Green, I think, is there's no way that's going to happen next year, if I can be so bold.
So is it appropriate to have something in the spring to kick off letterbox? I mean, to see if, should we have that on our work item to reach out to the volunteers on letterboxing? Or will you, or
that's, yeah, you can certainly do that if you wish to. Absolutely.
I'm not sure how it's happened in the past. It seems like the volunteers just come forward and communicate with you guys. And so I hope that we as a community can, meaning the Mercer Island community, can continue letterboxing. I think it's a good thing when we're all stuck close to home.
Okay. I can certainly put in there for maybe the March meeting to reach out to the volunteers about, you know, whether we're able to do that program next year. Like I said, it was very heavily supported by the recreation team. So we'll need to see, you know, in terms of printing all the booklets, and so we'll need to see what the volunteers are still willing to do without that support.
So Lisa?
Yeah, hi, thanks. So my question is just about the May 20th meeting and the plant selection. And I'm going to defer to the people who have been here for a long time, but is that early enough to really do a plant selection decision? And when do those decisions get implemented? Would it make more sense to flip that to the March 18th meeting and maybe move parking to May 20th if you needed to juggle things around, just because, you know, we have a great growing season here on Mercer Island, and maybe we want to settle down on plant selection earlier rather than later.
So this isn't so much asking for a lot of input on plant selection. This was more an item that the trustees had asked for information about how staff has been, you know, making those determinations about plant selection. You know, whether you would like it to be a more directive item. That wasn't originally, I think, maybe how it was framed, but I think you're right that if it was going to be that it would be probably earlier. We generally do our plant ordering in June and July for the planting season.
Right. Okay. Well, so I mean, I'll let you guys I'll just kind of let that idea marinate. I don't have a strong need to direct plant selection, but if there was a desire by the board as a whole to do that, you know, maybe sooner would be better.
Even I think from my perspective, it's really a question of staff timing. And, you know, if we put it in March, is that then too soon for you to have really gone out and figured out what was available? That sort of thing.
I don't know if you want to jump in on this, Kim.
Yeah, I think that in general, you know, we have a pretty strict suite of plants that we work with for forest restoration. And I think the driver behind this discussion was to give us an opportunity to talk about plant selection in the context of climate change and changing conditions on the ground with our drier summers and addressing root rot issues. I think that if you wanted to provide some input, I think that March would be fine, you know, and I don't think that it's going to impact the plant ordering at that point. I think that July would be much too late. I think that March or May would be fine if you wanted to actually have some input into the specific species that we're planting.
Hillary?
Kim, just out of curiosity, is part of that talk going to cover the idea of assisted migration?
It could, if that's something that you're interested in hearing about. I can include that.
I am just curious with what your thoughts are on that in terms of planting species that would do well here that may not necessarily be native.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Lisa, you talking?
Oh, I think she's talking to someone else in the room.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think my objective in bringing this up really was educational. The species that I see being planted in the park are familiar to me, but I just didn't have any background in why this one and not that one.
Yep. We're always happy to talk about that because it's something we spend a lot of time discussing.
Yeah.
Any more points of discussion?
No, I was going to say, I think it's good, like for all of us who interface with anybody in the community to be able to say, have an answer, even if it's not like a super detailed answer to why this one and not that one. So, that's great because there's always people complaining, these are too tall, these are too short, they don't turn color, they do turn color. It's nice to just have a little bit deeper knowledge about that kind of thing so you can engage when you're at Met Market or wherever. I value that kind of information a lot.
Yeah, I'm also interested in knowing what do we plant versus what is self-sustaining, like the trilliums. I have always assumed the trilliums are self-sustaining, but I could be wrong. So that's just another perspective.
Yeah.
Craig, Tom, did you have
I think
any?
that'll be a fun discussion.
Go ahead, Craig.
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, I'm assuming that on some of these items we'll circle back for the actual content. So regarding the annual report to the City Council, I see that we'll see a draft in January and we'll have an opportunity to comment on that. And I can give notes online for a few items I'd like to make sure are covered. And there's an item I might bring up later on in this meeting as well. So,
Is it something that belongs in the work plan as in terms of a discussion that we should be having?
Yes, I'd like to discuss the Engstrom open space and its status later in this meeting.
Okay. Is it something that's worthy of a larger discussion, Tom?
Yes,
or?
it doesn't really come under the heading of the work plan. It would be a sub item of the annual report to the City Council, but I'd like to bring it up as a discussion item later.
So if I could just intervene for a moment, just this is my city clerk side and referring to the Open Public Meetings Act. We are in a special meeting. And so technically any items that are off agenda should not be discussed. And they should be brought up at a different meeting when it can actually be referenced in the agenda. This is just to ensure that audience members or anybody viewing, assuming, again, I have to assume we have audience members, even if we don't, know when they should be tuning in based on the agenda that's been provided. Does that make sense?
All right, I'll just ask that to be added as an item for discussion in January. I just wanted to make sure it was in time enough to be included in the presentation of the annual report to the City Council.
Right. So I'll remind you what the annual report to City Council is. I think you all have seen them now drafted and come before you. So that what that usually is, the annual report to council is a summary of any actions that the trust board took in the previous year. So the way that Kim constructs it is by going back through the minutes of every meeting. And then I believe, Kim, it also covers, you know, restoration activities, things of that nature. It's generally just a report on what information the trust received
Yeah, and it also
or
includes,
acted on.
it also includes that information in the context of the forest health plan. So it looks at benchmarks outlined in the health plan versus what was accomplished.
Okay, so you like to add it as a separate item, Tom?
Yeah, probably would be a separate item then, and it doesn't have to go into the work plan. It would
You
just.
want to sort of flesh out the discussion that you would like to have?
Yes, I mentioned it in passing that I noticed that the Engstrom open space is not currently a property that's held by the trust. It's held by the city instead. So I wanted to raise the issue of that status and see if we wanted to take any action on it. So if we could.
I thought it was transferred to the trust, but perhaps I'm mistaken?
I reviewed the tax records prior to last meeting and found that it still is held in the name of the city.
Okay.
So we can just add that as a topic for discussion for next meeting.
Okay.
I mean, I mean, we've always sort of discussed it as if it was part of the trust, but maybe we should correct that.
No, there was an action several years ago. I'll need to go back and review exactly what the action was transferring it to the trust. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have concluded that discussion, and Elaine will put together a plan for us. The next item is the bylaw revisions for a second reading. We had quite a lengthy discussion last time. So do people have comments on the current draft?
I have two comments. There's a section header that was added for the terms of office, and it says term limits, and I'd like that to be rephrased as terms of office, because we're not really imposing, well, term limits has the connotation of being a limit on the number of consecutive terms, and we don't have that. So saying terms of office, that says the limit of the length of an individual term, which is really what that section is about.
Is there support for that change?
Yeah, I had the same comment.
Okay. If there's no, if everyone's okay with that, I've gone ahead and changed that.
Okay.
I noticed on page 1, there's no reference to footnote 2. There are 3 footnote markings, but it's 113, so that's just a typo that needs to be corrected.
And it is in my version of the plan. I show shall serve a 2-year term, and I have footnote 2 for ordinance number 96-002, Article 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
Would you like me to share my screen? Would that make this more easy, or is it better?
might be helpful to share your screen.
Okay, let me do that. Can you see that? I'm not seeing anything.
Yes, we can see it, Deb.
Yes.
Okay, so do I have I have a number of things open, so I just want to verify that I do indeed, what you're looking at is the bylaws?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. And I had one more comment before I give the floor over to someone else. In paragraph 2G3.
Oh, we lost it, Deb.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
We're on your email, though.
Yeah, right. Thank you. It doesn't me to, I've got 3 screens in front of me, so thank you for your patience. All right, I'm sorry, you said, repeat that.
Scroll down to 2G3. And
Okay.
the text there, oh, okay, that's been cleaned up.
Yeah, there were a couple of places where we did a word find and replace. And
Yes.
Craig pointed that out to me, and I think I've caught them all, but let's go through it to make everyone comfortable.
Right. I actually had a comment on that section. I think to be crystal clear, it should say the chairperson may serve 2 consecutive terms as chairperson.
Is everyone comfortable with that?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I had one suggestion, which would be to just do a word search on all the titles. So chairperson is sometimes capitalized, sometimes not.
Okay.
So you might just go through the word.
I'll do that after the meeting or when we go on to the next one. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, okay. Did anybody else have a comment?
This is Lisa. I'm going to take my hand down. I had some comments because I saw some stuff in the red line under the G that didn't look like it synced up, but I think it's all fixed.
Oh, you know what? There are some extra words though. If you go to like 3A.
3A under which?
It's in meetings. It says all meetings of the trustee board, and the word trustee should have been deleted.
All meetings of the board of trustees.
Oh, somebody's been, yeah, I'm looking at my clean copy. It still has the word trustee in it.
Yes, I fixed that. That was a find and replace.
Oh, okay.
And Craig pointed those out. So those were so obvious. I just went through and made those.
Thank you.
Yes.
So should we move to motions to approve? Is there a motion to approve the bylaw changes?
I'd
So
move
moved.
to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? So approved.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deb, did you get those first and second?
I believe it was Craig that made the motion and it was Hillary that made the second.
Was it Carolyn?
Me, Carolyn.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, Carolyn. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Makes it easier.
Yeah.
Oh, Marie, I think you're muted.
Sorry. The next item of business is the report on the Forest Stewardship Volunteer Program. Is that Kim?
It is indeed. So my name is Kim Frappier. I'm the Natural Resources Specialist for the City of Mercer Island. And I'm going to share my screen now. And this is my first time doing this, so hopefully all will go according to plan. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Oh, there it is.
Which screen, do you have the full screen?
We do.
Okay, great. Okay, so as many of you know, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we had some changes to our volunteer program this year. Although we were able to have volunteer restoration events in February, beginning in March through July, we did cancel them in order to maintain and adhere to state public health guidelines. During that time, we worked with Earth Corps to devise some alternatives once King County made it to phase 2. And Earth Corps actually put together a revised event protocol. And starting in August, we were actually able to begin having small scale modified events. And there we go.
Okay.
And so, and this is a protocol that they used for other jurisdictions that they worked with as well. And essentially, they limited the events to 5 people. They had people pre-register online, so you couldn't do any drop-in, volunteering, which was always a possibility in the past. They required all volunteers to wear face masks, of course, wear gloves, and then they provided each of the volunteers with their own set of sanitized hand tools, and of course, maintain social distancing during events. And so they held these events from August through October. Work focused along the 84th Avenue Southeast corridor in the Northwest Quadrant, primarily doing invasive plant removal, as well as hosting the city's 3rd annual Arbor Day. Sadly, because of the uptick in COVID-19 cases, the city made the decision to cancel all forest stewardship events led by Earth Corps in November and December. And so we were slated to have one last event in Pioneer Park, but that has been canceled. I wanted to share with you a couple of pictures from the events that we had this year so you could see it in action. Although we did have small events, they were very successful. The volunteers really enjoyed themselves. I got great feedback from the staff at Earth Corps. And so I think that the model was really working, even though we were engaging a smaller number of volunteers and may not have been getting the breadth of work done that we normally would with a larger group. But here you see one of our Earth Corps project leads, Savannah. She was our lead person this year from Earth Corps. And this is their health screening station. So as volunteers would arrive, they would first go through their registration, confirm their registration on their phones, and then they would have to go through a health screening. And then I don't have a picture of this, but then they also had tools set up for each individual volunteer on a tarp that were all 6 feet away. They had quite a process. And I will say that it was really a lot of work on their part to make all of this successful. This is one of our happy volunteers. You can see him smiling even through his mask. I call it the eyebrow smile. And he was evidently, what I heard from the Earth Corps staff is that he was one of the hardest workers they had ever seen, just very enthusiastic and happy to be out in our open spaces. And here we have our 3rd annual Arbor Day celebration. Very different from the large scale events that we had the previous 2 years, but still very successful. And we were very happy to have Deputy Mayor Wendy Weicker give a talk for us that day. We have it on video, put it out on Instagram and Facebook. And so we did that virtual message from City Council in lieu of the big in-person presentation that we would normally have. So there were 2 shifts that day, each with 5 volunteers. They planted about 150 trees and shrubs. And you may remember from last year, for those returning trustees, the Eagle Scout project in the northwest corner of the Northwest Quadrant, where Elliot Hendrickson built that split rail fence. This is actually the planting of the area behind that. And so that actually wraps up a project that we have been very excited about to improve the conditions in that front trailhead area. So that is the recap for the changes to the volunteer program. One thing I'll mention very briefly is that, right now, Elaine and I have been talking with the leadership at Earth Corps and the Mountains to Sound Greenway about what our volunteer program is going to look like next year. And we don't have anything definitive laid down, but it looks like we're likely not going to start having on the ground volunteer events with these nonprofits again, likely till summer. And so we're working on a plan for how we want to engage the Mercer Island community around forest stewardship in the intervening months till we can launch events again. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I just have one comment. I think that this was exceedingly well done when they made folks in the community aware that they could sign up through Earth Corps. I did that within a couple of hours, and all of the slots were full until November. So I was excitedly waiting for my November slot, and then it was canceled.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Carolyn.
Yeah, so my reflection on that is this was obviously still a very, very popular program. I'm really glad to see the pictures and see that it was run well. And the last question I had sent to Earth Corps, when they told me they had canceled, was when will you be resuming in January? So I guess you've answered the question, but I think it does raise another question, and that is there an ability, and I understand, there are limitations under COVID responses, but is there a way that we can engage the community in these sorts of activities? Because it appears to me that there's significant interest and enthusiasm in this.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm also particularly interested in what the plans are for bringing the community in to help in the interim. And so I'm sure you'll let us know in succeeding meetings.
Yeah, we will definitely report back once we have a more definitive plan, with Earth Corps. We are, right now not knowing what the, state health guidelines are going to be around COVID over the next couple of months. We're likely going to be looking at kind of virtual outreach, through social media and doing some public education through that venue. Otherwise I'll have to report back. We're really taking it kind of month by month, but our plan is to circle back with Earth Corps in the second quarter of next year and start making more definitive plans once we get to early spring.
So would this be an opportunity to provide some education to the community, particularly as you were talking about, selection of plants, or what species are at risk versus those that are actively being supported? I mean, I'm just kind of brainstorming here, but if there is a desire to keep the community engaged, would there be the opportunity perhaps to do a webcast or some sort of other educational program?
Yeah, so one thing we are doing right now with the Mountains to Sound Greenway is we are having their outreach staff actually put together some educational social media posts that actually highlight the accomplishments of forest stewardship on Mercer Island during the last 5 years. And so in the next month, you will see those go out. Another thing that we're doing with the Greenway is having them do active outreach to Mercer Island schools to share their educational curriculum that they have been using that focuses on forest stewardship, water quality, and salmon recovery. And so that is, so because we weren't able to have these organizations on the ground doing volunteer engagement, we are actually having, at least the Greenway at this point, put their energies into doing that virtual outreach and trying to engage people with social distancing and doing a lot of remote learning.
Kim, can I ask you to stop sharing your screen just so we can see everyone in a discussion?
You can, and I'm going to tell you that I've been trying to figure it out the entire time I've been talking. And I just found it on my, I have two screens I'm working from, and I just found the button on the second screen. So my apologies.
I realized I was squinting at you all very small, so.
Yeah, so that's better. So yeah, but so to speak to your idea, Carol, I think that those are great ideas. And if you have specific ideas that you would like to share with us, please send me an email. I think that, we are going to be, brainstorming and working on these items with both of the nonprofits that we contract with. And so I would welcome, any and all suggestions,
Thanks for that. I just, it occurs to me that if we don't step up with something to engage our volunteers, we may be at risk for, a loss of interest, or they'll just assume that there's nothing that's going to be going on. And I think this gives us another way of keeping folks engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a concern that we share with you, Carolyn. It weighs heavy on our mind. Our volunteer program is very important to us, and we really value the work of volunteers. We also value the input and the engagement, the educational opportunities that it provides for us. And so, yeah, we need to be creative and fill that void.
Yeah.
So Carol, I was booted off of my November volunteer opportunity too.
Oh, you were.
I
It's so disappointing.
I wasn't even able to sign up for Pioneer Park, so I picked another park.
Yeah. So Marie, if you would like to become an official forest steward,
I might.
I
would actually.
do an ad hoc training, and I could get you set up to work independently. How's that?
That would be great. And something I was also thinking, and this is, I'm sort of like, I'm not sure how to do this, but I remember quite a while ago having a conversation with Paul West, and one of the things he said was, the jewel weed that grows in the park, it's mostly like along the paths, and he would be happy for people to pull it out and throw it away. I wonder if we could put a poster up and say, if you see this, feel free to pull it and toss it aside. Because it's an easy weed to deal with. But it, for little kids in particular, it's kind of like, give them a sense of this is my park too.
Yeah. Lisa, you had a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know all the legalities of this, but I know that whenever we ask for volunteer help, there are issues with whether that's taking work away from city employees. And so we definitely want to look into it. I love engaging the community in ways that makes them feel like they own the park and have a vested interest in it. And I mean, I secretly pull weeds all the time myself and throw them in the garbage bin. I just one little speed bump on the way to getting there, if we can, just as a cautionary note.
Right. This particular volunteer work, so invasive removal work, since it has such a long-standing history with our volunteer events, I think we'd run into that a lot less, but it's certainly something we keep in mind.
Thanks, Elaine.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else?
Okay, thank you, Kim. The next thing is the 2020 restoration report. And is that Kim or Elaine?
That would be me.
Okay.
Kim's taking most of the presentations.
Okay.
It's pretty much the Kim show for the next two presentations. And I will go ahead and share my screen again here. Thank you for your patience as I get this. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so I am pleased to present the restoration work plan for 2020. I'm going to provide you with a brief summary of the staff report that you received in your agenda packet, and then would be happy to take your questions. So I'd like to go ahead and start with a brief overview of the status of the natural resources staff. I know that you already had a chance to hear from Jason Kintner and Elaine about the Public Works and Parks and Recreation departmental and staffing changes. But I want to speak to how those have specifically impacted the work of the Natural Resources Program. So due to COVID-19 related budget cuts, the Natural Resources Specialist position, which is yours truly, was temporarily eliminated between April to mid-June. In addition, all casual labor positions were eliminated for the year for Parks and Recreation, and this included the seasonal restoration and trails crew. And normally these seasonal staff would be responsible for monitoring and treating noxious weed populations, doing spot watering of new plantings, some targeted weeding, mulch deliveries, and other support duties on all trust properties. So as described earlier, the volunteer stewardship program also saw some cuts, and so that impacted our ability to do some restoration work. However, I'm happy to report, as I sit before you, that the natural resources specialist was reinstated, and we began working on restoration through professional contractors in early July. So we are having professional restoration contractor work on 82 acres within all 3 quadrants of Pioneer Park and Engstrom open space. The bulk of the work this year focuses on invasive tree treatment and ivy rings, with a small number of maintenance projects on comprehensive restoration and planting sites. The city did not take on any large-scale planting projects this biennium across all open spaces in order to focus on maintenance of existing restoration sites. Though 2 small plantings were scheduled for contractors within Pioneer Park, as well as that 1 volunteer planting for Arbor Day. So you will, looking here at the northwest quadrant for Pioneer Park, you can see that we actually are touching almost every area unit within the park, focusing on invasive tree treatment and ivy rings primarily, but then also with those 2 small plantings I mentioned, and then 1 area of invasive removal maintenance on a much older comprehensive restoration site. So 1 planting that has already been installed in the northwest quadrant is located at the intersection of the Dogwood and Woodpecker trails. And this is a project that we talked about last year that had been cleared by volunteers through Earth Corps by Islander Middle School. And unfortunately, after the area was cleared of ivy, it became a new hotspot for off-leash dogs. And we saw a lot of soil compaction and trampling of and digging up of the understory plants in there. And you may recall that we installed temporary green plastic fencing that continued to get cut down by park visitors, and signs were removed. And in an effort to help rehabilitate the site, we finally decided to do a dense planting, primarily of understory species, but with some canopy species as well, and then install a sturdier, still temporary, but sturdier wood slat fencing. And so this first picture on the left shows you the before, and on the right, this is actually you can see a couple of the crew members in the back staging plants. This is the project when it was first staged. And then this is what the site looks like now with the fencing up. So you can see the fencing is brown and kind of blends into the landscape more effectively than the plastic fencing did. We still have the educational signage up. But right after this got planted, we had a major storm and a big leaf drop. So you can't really see the plants very well that were installed. But I was very pleased with how this project turned out. We planted not only this big area that you see in this picture, but then I also did some infill planting behind that bench that's at that trail intersection to address some of the trampling that we were also seeing behind that bench. Moving to the northeast quadrant, again, we are focusing a lot on invasive tree treatment and ivy rings, but also have a small planting of about 175 plants along with erosion control fabric in the very northeast corner. And I don't know how well you can see in the slide, but it says planting and erosion control, and there's a red box around the area. This is that trail junction that meets up with the bridge that goes into Engstrom open space. And during the last couple of years, dog walkers and actually mountain bikers have continued to cut the switchback along this leg of the trail, causing some surface soil erosion and trampling vegetation. Andy Prince, our trail specialist, and I had actually planted this area up last year, put up a bunch of educational signage, only to find this year that the signage had gotten thrown into the ravine and people had continued to cut the switchback. And so I'm bringing in the big guns this year, and I decided to actually have to hire contractors to install erosion control fabric. And we are also going to install some of that wood slat fencing around the area to allow to try to break the habit of folks cutting the trail and have something sturdier to deter folks. So that will be starting the first week of December, in case you're interested, checking that out. So in the southeast quadrant, we received feedback that the ivy rings in this quadrant were getting really, really bad, I think from a couple of trustees, and decided to focus our efforts on ivy rings, again, and invasive tree treatment here. You know, despite not having the seasonal restoration crew, I was able to conduct knotweed monitoring at the site, and am happy to report that we're in our second year of not having any knotweed. That is represented in this map by the red triangle that you see in this brownish area. Can you see my cursor? I don't know if you can see that.
No, we can't.
No.
You can't see that, okay. I need a pointer. And then moving on to Engstrom open space. This is the area where contractors will be working this year with a focus on invasive tree treatment. One thing I want to note about the invasive tree treatment is that this is actually maintenance invasive tree work. A number of these sites actually had initial invasive tree treatment done back in 2010 using an older frilling method. And so now we're actually going back in and using the EasyJect lance that the trust board previously approved for use in the park, as well as doing cutting and painting of smaller stems or even manual removal. So we're using much more effective methods now. So by acreage, here's the breakout of what we're looking at by task. Ivy rings we'll be working on 34 acres. Invasive tree treatment, we'll be working on 59. Planting maintenance, 8.3. Invasive removal maintenance, 3.3. And then we just have about a ½ acre of plant installation. And that is our 2020 restoration work plan. Do you have any questions?
No, great report.
Yeah.
Hey, hi, this is Lisa. I have a question. Can you just give me the 5-second version of what constitutes an invasive tree? Because I understand invasive plants, but
Yes.
invasive trees is kind of a new concept for me.
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. And I'm going to reshare my screen because I actually anticipated this question and I created a slide for us.
I didn't even sneak preview that with you.
You
You
didn't.
guys talked beforehand, come on.
We did not.
Okay, let me share this one more time here.
For what it's worth, I had the same question.
Okay, so invasive trees. Come on now, here you go. So invasive trees include English holly, English laurel, also referred to as cherry laurel, which is the second from the right, bird cherry, and English hawthorn. There are other species that are considered invasive that are canopy species, but these are the top 4 that we're finding in Mercer Island parks. Other parks, we also see a lot of horse chestnut, which I don't have pictured here, but the 3 top offenders within Pioneer Park are the holly, laurel, and the cherry. And so these are the species that we're finding, and particularly with holly and laurel, that they can actually create dense thickets that completely outcompete not only our understory species, but will actually outcompete regenerating conifers. And particularly for these species, you often will have a complete dead zone underneath them, that they don't necessarily grow copacetically and in harmony with other species. And so they're very aggressive, they spread rapidly. And frankly, they're a big problem in our Mercer Island parks. And so we prioritize that to help, protect our canopy. Does that
Okay. Yeah, no, that's perfect. I mean, I recognize all of these as plants that are, planted very heavily, in residential areas. And so I could see how they would spread like with seeds and birds and whatever. But I want to make a bad joke about how we've been fighting the English for 225 years, but
oh, yeah, that is funny.
But
yes.
that's great. This is really good information. I have personal experience with 3 out of these 4 plants and I hate them.
Yeah, and I will just make a note that these species are considered weeds of concern. They're not listed under state or county. They're not mandated for control. However, they are recommended for control by the King County Noxious Weed Board. And it is common practice in forest restoration to address these species. So this is something that is recognized regionally. Okay. Any other questions?
Do we need a motion?
Oh, go ahead, Craig.
Oh, do we need a motion to approve the plan?
Sorry, I have to unmute myself. I just had one thought. I mean, Elaine and I talked earlier today, Kim, a lot of this is written in sort of like the present tense or the future tense, but actually a lot of the work you talked about is already completed, correct?
Yeah, and that is simply a function of when we held, when my position came back online, yeah. When the meetings came back online. So, so what tense would you like me to write this in? I will write whatever tense you want. I mean, would it make sense to have it in future tense?
Well, most of it's done, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is still a lot of work to be done in the next 6 weeks, but yes, a lot of it is done.
Yeah. I mean, I think I really brought it up more for the benefit of everybody to understand what's been done versus what might be done. I mean, Elaine, shared with me that this report is really only meant for the trust board. It's not going to be, for example, sent off to the.
Yeah, it's not like the city council report out.
I'm not particularly bothered by the tense, so long as people understand that there's kind of a hodgepodge here.
Okay. Yeah, and I think.
Sorry. I just wanted to, say this because Kim wasn't quite as maybe explicit as she could have been about this, but I think that this is it's actually pretty extraordinary how much restoration work is happening in the park this year, considering that Kim's position was just reinstituted in mid-June. She would normally have done all of this work and in fact was well on her way in February when, when things started to shut down. She would have normally had contractors hitting the ground in, late March or April. And to get this up and turned around so quickly was just a Herculean task. And so, I think it's worth recognizing maybe that, having this much acreage in restoration is pretty truly remarkable. And just to stay on course with the forest health plan in this year is worth some accolades. So.
Right, and I would mention this is not the only park she has to work out.
It is definitely not. It's
don't
very
have
large,
exclusively
but
for ourselves.
yeah.
For my next Herculean effort, I have to inspect all of this work. So
Yeah.
I'm going to be getting my 10,000 steps in. I'll just tell you that.
Kim's been very busy. She's been very busy. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Great. Okay, so Kim, I think this is you too. Regional Sword Fern Decline update.
Okay, let me, this might just take me a moment because I need to open one more presentation. You're never going to want to hear from me again.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
sorry, did we need to vote on this?
Oh,
Yes.
I was thinking, yeah, you're right. There is a recommendation that we adopt it. So,
You, Marie, whether or not you want to formally adopt it. Kim, I believe it's normally because it's at the beginning of the season.
yeah, normally we would do it prior to work beginning, and you would actually do a process of adopting the work plan.
how about I suggest that we ratify it?
Yeah.
Do I have a motion for ratification?
Yes.
I second.
Carol?
Anybody, I don't care who gets it.
So as also the person who's in charge of the minutes and taking notes of who does them, can I figure out who made the motion and who seconded?
Hillary made the motion.
Hillary made the motion.
Carol and Lisa jointly seconded it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carol did that.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I would say we were unanimously ratified.
Excellent.
Okay, sword ferns.
Okay, here we go. We're almost there. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so tonight I'm going to provide you with a brief overview of the status of Western sword fern decline and a high-level summary of the work of the Sword Fern Decline Working Group. And this was a work plan item that was requested either the end of last year or earlier this year by trustees. So by way of reminder, Western sword fern is a dominant evergreen understory plant in Puget Sound forests. It is widely distributed in low elevation forests from Alaska all the way to California. It grows to 3 feet tall, reproduces through spores, and thrives in moist forest soils that are high in organic matter content. It is extremely long-lived, can live even upwards of 300 years, and is an important habitat for birds and small mammals. In fact, it is a food source for black-tailed deer, which we do have on the island, and mountain beaver, which we do not. Sword fern is an important species in forest ecology, playing an important role in nutrient cycling and stormwater runoff management. So what is the problem with sword fern? So beginning in 2013, the City of Seattle staff and forest stewards began noticing significant decline in sword fern populations around Seward Park in Seattle. The photographs pictured here are from what Seattle Park staff refer to as ground zero of sword fern decline. What started out as a small patch of die-off grew to include over 15 acres of dead sword fern, and they saw this decline rapidly occur within 4 to 5 years. Other jurisdictions and land managers across the region also reported declining sword fern, including locations in Jefferson, Kitsap, and Snohomish counties, as well as here on Mercer Island. 2 populations of declining sword fern have been mapped on Mercer Island, one at Upper Luther Burbank Park and one at North Mercerdale Hillside. I will note that to date, we do not have any documented within trust properties. However, it is worth noting that we do not actually know for certain whether the decline on Mercer Island sites is due to the same issues that we're seeing at Seward Park. And actually, you know, the jury is still out as to what the issues are at Seward Park, which I will get into more later. But unlike the Seward Park sites, on Mercer Island, we are not seeing the exact same conditions. Unlike the Seward Park sites, we are actually not seeing other understory or canopy species decline within the sword fern decline site boundary. It's also important to note that this, to put in context, that this decline is occurring in tandem with the decline of other iconic Northwest forest species, such as bigleaf maple, Pacific madrone, and western red cedar. And so I just want to note on this slide, this gives you a cursory glance at where other sword fern sites have detected some decline or die off. Mercer Island primarily has what are considered blue or provisional sites, whether you're seeing scattered decline. We do have one site that's considered moderate at Upper Luther Burbank Park. But again, it's not, at this point, it's not considered to have major ecological impact. The primary sites that they're, you know, the red sites are, the primary one is still at Seward Park at this point. So what does sword fern decline look like? It's important to note that the symptoms described are also consistent with what we would see with water or drought stress. In the early stage of decline, plants will have curling brown fronds and leaflets with symptoms starting at the tip and working downward. Fronds in the lower crown, you will notice will generally die off naturally. So the symptoms we're looking for are in the current year's growth, not in the die-off from the previous year. In an unhealthy fern, the current year's growth will appear wilted and dry and brown. In a healthy sword fern, the crowns will also have fiddleheads that expand into fronds in that next spring. In unhealthy ferns, you will see few to no new fiddleheads forming. In late stage decline, you will actually observe a complete loss of fronds, leaving a crown stump that will persist for several years without regenerating. In response to this concern and this challenge, the City of Seattle and the Friends of Seward Park convened the Sword Fern Decline Working Group in 2015. And this brought together partners from local universities such as UW and WSU, Earth Corps, other municipalities. Elaine and I have participated in this working group, students, as well as park volunteers. The City of Seattle eventually hired a research consulting firm called Verdant Consulting to support and assist the working group in developing a strategic plan to better structure and organize this very diverse group of stakeholders. And so from this strategic planning process, two primary goals were developed. The first, of course, to determine the cause and drivers of sword fern decline, and two, to identify effective restoration strategies, to continue to ensure forest ecosystem health into the future. The four primary strategic objectives in the plan were to continue with regional monitoring and mapping, to promote multidisciplinary research, to actively manage and restore sites that were seeing sword fern decline, and then also to prevent and mitigate sword fern loss. So now I'd like to give a high-level overview of the projects that have been implemented by the work group. And I want to note that this really varies from projects that were citizen science-based, by volunteers, all the way up to, plant microbiologists who have 30 years of experience. So there's really a wide range of experience and research going on, around this issue. So mapping and monitoring is going on regionally. Most of the research to date has actually taken place at Seward Park and has been largely driven by the City of Seattle or Friends of Seward Park, and most of which has been grant funded. One of the main working hypotheses that the working group first began exploring is that the decline is the result of disease, a bacterial, fungal, or viral pathogen. However, what's interesting is that study findings to date by these research scientists, university faculty, and consultants do not indicate that the decline is caused by a pathogen. This doesn't mean that it isn't, but the research to date at least does not point to that. Another line of investigation has been looking at water stress and plant-water relations in sword ferns. And so a collaborative study was done by a Reed College student, Verdant Consulting in the City of Seattle. But again, the data from that study didn't support the hypothesis that moisture stress was actually a primary driver in the fern decline. Another study was done on soil nutrient testing to see if nutrient deficiency was an issue. And that was actually led by Earth Core Science. And they actually found that in the die-off sites, phosphorus, potassium, and calcium were actually above optimal range in the die-off site. And this likely reflected that the decomposition of the dead plant material following the fern mortality, basically led to an excess of nutrients available in the soil. There was actually an exclosure study done on mountain beavers in the Seward Park site. There's a big mountain beaver colony there that normally, actually feed off of the sword fern. So they were trying to just figure out if if that population was actually an impact. And again, that was inconclusive. There's also been some experimental restoration, meaning healthy ferns were installed into the die-off site to see if they would actually, if there would be an impact on those ferns. And that study is actually ongoing through 2023. And without knowing, what the driver is of sword fern decline, it's really hard to determine what is actually causing any kind of decline on those newly installed plants. So that project is a work in progress. So where does that leave us? What are our next steps? The take-home message is that further study is needed. We need to better understand the ecological conditions across all sword fern decline sites to determine variables that may be consistent across all sites. We also need to consider the role of climate change. It is quite feasible that what we are observing is a regional ecosystem shift in response to changing climatic conditions. We, of course, want to continue to document occurrences of sword fern decline, and continue the really rich partnerships between municipalities, the university community, and the friends groups to move the research forward. The working group has an iNaturalist account where they are encouraging citizen scientists to document occurrences of 5 or more dead ferns in a contiguous patch. So they don't want people just to document individual ferns here and there, but if you actually see critical mass of impacted ferns, they're asking the community to map those so that they can be investigated. If you are interested in being part of the mailing list to get regular updates, I'd be happy to share the email address of Lisa Seco, who is the City of Seattle plant ecologist who oversees this work and the working group. And I would also be happy to take your questions today and do my best to answer as many as I can. And whatever I can't answer, I can also refer you to Lisa. And so that concludes my presentation.
So I see Hillary's hand.
Question for you and Elaine Kim. Is this problem something that's been recognized regionally? So also in Oregon and Northern California forests as well?
So there has been a population that has been documented in Oregon as well. And I would have to get more. I was actually just reading a report this week that the student from Reed College had documentation of populations in Oregon that were impacted. I don't know about Northern California though. It may be.
Thank you.
This is Lisa Anderl. Yeah, hey, so there was a mention in the presentation, Kim, about the connection with climate change, but is there data to support that, or is it speculation? It seems to me if it were a climate change driven thing, it would be more widespread than just the couple of hotspots that we saw.
Yeah, I think that the idea behind that is that we're at the beginning of the process, and that, what we are seeing in restoration on the ground is that we're seeing drier, more droutier summers, during the growing season. And that has been linked to climate change. And so that is why that hypothesis is there, is that the sword ferns could be responding to those droutier conditions that we're seeing.
Which I think it's worth pointing out that effect would be exacerbated on more well-draining sites. So sites that don't retain moisture as much just naturally because of whether it's the amount of organic matter in the soil or some other, the duff layer or something like that. That's the theory, at least. I mean, whether it's climate change or whether you want to talk about it as more of a localized, progressive or sort of a long-term drought stress, seeing that on a lot of things. Western red cedars, right? A lot of those convert hemlock species, things like that. So you tend to see sort of the leading edge of those effects on these really well-drained sites, and it could be a similar effect with sword ferns.
Yeah, and the two sites where we're seeing it on Mercer Island are particularly well draining sandy soils, actually, which is or more sandy soils. So that is something that really stands out to me, compared to the soils that we're seeing, like in Pioneer Park Northwest. And so my concern for the sites on Mercer Island is that we might actually be seeing a drought response.
Right. But it may look similar to what's happening in Seward Park, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same thing. I think it's worth, just continuing to point that out is, we see we see plant die-offs for various reasons, right? Whether it's something specific to those sites or it's about the environmental conditions, whatever. So I think, you know, the fact that this is being looked at regionally is great, right? I mean, obviously we want to capture it if it's something that really is pervasive, but the way that it looks and the way that it's spread in Seward Park is just so different and on such a different scale than anything we've seen anywhere else. So,
yeah, and I think that, you know, at first the working group's focus was really trying to find some silver bullet. They were convinced that it had to be a pathogen like Phytophthora or some kind of root disease, and then they started doing the microbial assays, and it wasn't providing the, you know, the data to support that. And I think more and more, you know, members of the working group are realizing that, you know, forests are complex ecological systems that have many, you know, intersecting and interacting variables. And so, you know, it could be a combination of drought stress, climate, that then is stressing the plant out, that then makes it more susceptible to disease, you know, I mean, and that's, you know, so these are some of the conversations that we're having. And I know that the work will continue, and I know that the lack of answers has been really frustrating, you know, but science is a process and it takes a long time. And it, if you're going to do it right, there needs to be replication of studies. And, you know, so that's kind of where we're at right now.
So Kim, I know we have more than one species of ferns in our parks.
We do.
Are we seeing anything else? Or is this really specific to sword ferns?
You know, not having done a comprehensive survey of all the other species, you know, I can really only speak to what I'm seeing in sword fern. You know, qualitatively or anecdotally, I'm not seeing, you know, we just don't have the same kind of distribution of other fern species like we do for sword fern.
yeah.
They're not as dominant in the understory. You know, I think one species that stands out, you know, seasonally is licorice fern, which you will see growing up big leaf maple trunks and on nurse logs and everything. And I haven't observed that being impacted in the same way that we're seeing sword fern.
It does tend to also be pretty drought sensitive, but that's a seasonal difference. The other one that's very seasonal that we have throughout a lot of our parks is bracken fern, which dies off during the summer also.
Yeah.
But there's, you know, there's a number of different ferns. They're just so different and not nearly in the numbers that we, you know, sword fern, you know, lady fern, deer fern, there's plenty of them out there, but
yeah.
You know, really it feels like all of those added up still don't even really equal to the amount of cover that we see from sword fern.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a huge part of the understory in Pioneer Park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would. I mean, you saw those earlier pictures that I showed of Seward Park. I mean, it's devastating. That was nearly 100%, the understory was nearly 100% sword fern cover, you know, and there are parts of Pioneer Park that are similar to that. And so I'm knocking on wood and crossing all my fingers and toes that we can not get this at Pioneer Park.
I have two things. One is a comment, which is I have like 40 of these on my property. I'll let you know if any of them look like they're ailing. But are we seeing that last picture from Seward Park was 2017? Are we seeing any other species come back to take over that space?
So what's interesting at Seward Park is that they have actually not had other species colonate that site. And I would say that's one of the things that has been most striking to me about our Mercer Island sites is that I'm actually seeing other weedy species come in to our Mercer Island sites, like Gallium, which is the bed straw, you know, the sticky one that sticks to your ankles when you walk through the park. Yeah. You know, unfortunately, things like stink bob, you know, are some of our other weedier species. But I'm also not seeing decline in like Oregon grape or some of our other native, you know, in those areas. but at Seward Park, they actually are not seeing any natural colonization, even by weedy species, which is really concerning. You know, maybe, yeah. So, and now they're actually doing active restoration in those sites. So they decided to finally start outplanting and doing active restoration in those areas because they had to get something on the ground. Incidentally, they also, and I'm also just gonna be mindful of time, I'll just say, we can continue this conversation, you know, through email or offline. But the other issue that they're having in that sword fern decline site is actually laminated root rot, and they've actually lost a fair number of western hemlocks at that site. And so there is some, so that's a big issue, you know, because we also are seeing that across Pioneer Park, you know, with different root rot and fungal diseases. So, so they're seeing not just sword fern decline, there is definitely some ecosystem shift going on, you know, across species, which is of great concern. Yeah.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
And I don't know about anybody else, but I would certainly be interested in getting, you know, into the email chain and just kind of see what's, you know, what comes up.
Yeah, certainly. I can, Marie, why don't I send you the contact information, and if you'd like to share it with the rest of the trustees, you can contact.
Nice.
Yeah, and we'll certainly, you know, bring this back if there are, you know, developments or progressions with this or anything obviously that affects trust properties. So we'll keep you apprised of anything that comes up.
Yeah, and I'll also direct you to the Green Seattle Partnership webpage. They have a webpage devoted to the sword fern decline, and I know that Lisa Seco is constantly updating that site with new studies and updates about, you know, what's happening with the research. So that would be a good place to check out too. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So the last thing on our agenda is the Maryland Hathaway bench restoration update.
Yeah.
Oh, was that your project?
It's not. I'm going to hand it off to Tom here in a second, if that's okay with him. But I did want to just, you know, introduce this topic, which was, I was looking back at when this project started to really get off the ground, which was, I believe it was last May, was when Trustee Hildebrandt started working with an Eagle Scout on this project, and I am very excited to say that it is complete and that I've actually started getting emails from the public about it. So I'm going to share a picture just so you all can see it in its refurbished form. You'll recall that this bench had started to degrade several years ago, and this was in honor of Marilyn Hathaway, who was really important for the establishment of the trust and the preservation of Pioneer Park. And it was a beautiful bench, and it has gotten a very nice facelift. So I'll hand it off to Tom.
Yes, I actually started working with Joe Lemaster about a year and a half ago. So it was quite a while. I gave him recommendations on materials and also provided him with some of the tools, and did part of the restoration of the ironwork, since I have a welding rig and it was just easier for me to do that. So probably the most difficult part of the restoration was removing the old posts, which go down in 2.5 feet in the ground. And so Joe organized a team of scouts to come in and do the digging, and that really was the heavy lifting for the project. And so anyway, it's nice to see that it's completed, and I'm pleased to see it looking like it used to. So
It's beautiful. Kudos.
and I assume we'll recognize him formally in the
Yeah.
August meeting next year.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it's gorgeous. So thank you very much. I mean, it's definitely worth preserving the ironwork and rebuilding the fence around it. And somebody's handwriting is really nice too.
So may I ask a question, Tom? Were you able to reuse the bird? Is that for the original bird?
Yes, so it's all the original ironwork except for the piece of strap steel that was missing. I was able to obtain a little piece of strap steel that was a match for the original, and then I just welded that on and did a little bit of refurbishing, painted it, and then the bird was part of the original, so it's all the original ironwork back there on the bench.
That's a lovely tribute, but yeah,
Yes.
thanks to everybody who participated in that.
Okay, here we go. So thank you, Tom. And I know, I mean, we talked about it for probably 2 years before you got started on the project, so it's been a long time coming. Quadrant reports. Who has the Northwest? Jerry?
So I went out about 3 this afternoon. There seems to be a lot of downfall that happens in this Northwest Quadrant. And this afternoon, it looked like a fresh fall out there, like the top of a tree, kind of. It was only on half the trail, and it looked like it had been walked around in that area. So you're on mute.
Elaine, you're.
Where was it exactly in the Northwest Quadrant, Jerry?
We were walking down 84th, so on the pathway.
On the perimeter trail?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Northeast. Tom and Carol. Tom first.
Yes, I was able to get out yesterday and walk through the southeast and northeast quadrants. Generally, things in the northeast quadrant look pretty good. I do notice the erosion near the bridge, and because of the winds and rain lately, there's a lot of leaf litter on the trails now that would be difficult to blow away. That probably just will turn into organic matter and needs to be dealt with later somehow.
Right, yeah, so usually we wait until after all of the leaves are down and then we just do a full blow of the trail so that it doesn't get mashed up into new water organic matter. So I know that's on Andy's radar, and I'm sure he's getting very close here. So I think we'll make a big push on that soon. Thanks for noting it.
Anything to add, Carol?
In the Northeast with Hillary and Marie, and we had reported in, actually, I'll give Hillary credit for this. We reported some rotted woods where there's wood slats where there's some areas of traction that were rotted away. So I know that we alerted the group to that, and that's been addressed. I think it's been addressed. At least we got a response back.
Elaine, you said you had talked to Andy about repairing just the metal grating that was on there for traction, right?
Right, yeah, and I don't know that he's gotten to it yet, but I know it is on his work list for the short term, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for alerting him to that. He was really helpful.
I have not actually been out since all this rain and weather started, so I'm going to assume that the northeast where I'm supposed to be, or the southeast where I'm supposed to be walking hasn't really changed. So I think that's it. Next meeting is January. Is that right?
Let's see, January.
It is. I'm so sorry that I don't have it up right now.
All right.
It is January 21st.
January 21st. Okay, terrific. Well, I'm sure everybody is doing something not in the ordinary for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but I hope everybody can find a way to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, for the record, can I confirm, do you want to hold that meeting at 5 o'clock like we've been doing?
It works fine for me. Does anybody else? I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be a Zoom meeting.
It will be for
Yeah.
a while.
So does 5 still work for everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, it works for me. Earlier actually works better. I love
Yeah.
daytime meetings. If the group wanted to get together and say we could meet during what would be normal business hours, if that didn't inconvenience anybody, that would be great for me. I like to do family stuff in the evening, but I've got not a strong thing on that.
Was there a possibility of maybe moving it to 4?
4 works for me. What about you, Hillary? I know you
I think
have
that's going to present challenges for me with class because in the winter I have classes until 4 in Linwood.
Yeah.
That's fine. I just thought I'd throw it out
Okay.
there. I don't know this group, so I just figured I'd raise it up the flagpole.
Okay.
Sure, it's scheduled.
Thank you, everyone. This has been a pleasure to be at this first meeting for me, and I appreciate everybody's community service and volunteerism and the staff people who are here late at night. Thank you, every single one of you. This has been really wonderful. I love the mission of this board.
Well, one of the things I'm happy about, Lisa, is that you have a 2-year term, so we actually will have you for a length of time that feels productive.
Well, I have to run for re-election next year, though. I only have
All right, well, okay.
Not until the end of 2021.
Assume the best.
I only have 1 year left on city council, but I have 2 years left on the damn trust. So we'll see how that works out.
Would somebody like to move for adjournment?
So moved.
A second?
Second. Anybody
All right,
second?
Lisa gets credit for that second. That was Tom moving, Lisa seconding. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Bye.
All right, thanks, everyone. I'll see you next year.
Okay.
Thank you, Marie.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a great holiday.